Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new and you like to hear about opinions, reviews, and analyses on films, books, and TV shows, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more content from me. It's that time of the month where I get to working on my TBR list. Although this book I'll be giving my review on today hasn't been on my TBR for too long, probably less than 2 months give or take. So today's video will be on Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. I found out about this book before it even came out via Instagram. Basically, I was scrolling through my Explore feed and I follow quite a few Bookstagram accounts. I stumbled upon a screenshot of a Twitter post where a girl is holding up the book and captioned it as, "When your sister bases a character off you in her book, when everyone hates that character." Interesting marketing, by the way, but it works. So I was curious and looked it up, and I was even more intrigued when I read the plot summary. So buckle up and let me tell you all about Portrait of a Thief because I have so many thoughts and things I have to say about it. As always, I will begin with a spoiler-free review. But before I go on, let me give a very quick plot summary. It's a heist novel that also explores the Chinese-American diaspora and the effects of post-colonialism, with 5 Chinese-American students who are hired by a benefactor to steal looted Chinese artifacts from museums in the West, who refuse to give those artifacts back to China. As you all know from previous videos, I am absolutely in love with heist stories. So naturally, I was hooked from the moment I read Heist and was even more intrigued with the mentions of the effects of post-colonialism being a major theme in the story. I don't think I've encountered many heist stories that deal with post-colonialism, so it was definitely unique. The story is told in third-person limited point of view following the main characters, Will, Alex, Daniel, Irene, and Lily. Each perspective is told in a different chapter to allow a better understanding of the story, as well as their characters and their dynamics with one another. And that's something I loved. Multiple POVs throughout the story, and third person is just a lot easier for me to get into rather than first person. The novel is incredibly well written. I particularly loved the fleshed out characters, with each of them having a distinct voice and personality. They're also relatable characters since they're roughly my age, college age that is, but they're also relatable due to being immigrants, trying to connect with their heritage, and then trying to figure out how they belong to the country they immigrated to, which is the US. The dynamics were very interesting too. Most of the heist members got along really well and others didn't, which causes some friction and some drama, but it wasn't super drawn out. And going back to the characters, each of them are more than just the heist archetype they each represent. Plus, they're not professional criminals, so it was fun watching them trying to figure out how to plan heists. The novel is also very contemporary, like there are mentions of the pandemic as well as the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. So that was a really pleasant surprise and also makes the novel even more grounded in reality. The novel is also very good for studying the show don't tell technique and how to limit information given to readers. That being said, there was a lot of monologue with the characters, but it makes sense. After all, a big theme of the book is them wrestling with their identities as Chinese Americans, and each of them has their own complicated relationship with their heritage. Normally, with an ensemble of characters, there's not a lot of balance, but this novel was able to balance all of its protagonists really well. So overall, I would definitely read it again. It's such a good novel, and I highly recommend reading it, especially if you're a fan of Six of Crows or even just heist stories in general. In this part of the video, I will be giving my thoughts and reactions to more specific things in the novel. So this part isn't spoiler-free. If you haven't read the book yet or haven't finished reading it, feel free to skip this part of the video. So the first thing I want to go more in depth about is the characters, specifically who I didn't like and who I related to. I hated Irene at first because of her attitude. She definitely had a snobby, conceited tone at the beginning, especially towards Alex. But eventually I grew fond of her the more the story progressed. She's got layers, and I appreciate that. I definitely related to Will a lot, especially as an Asian kid in humanities. I don't know if I'd ever consider myself an artist like Will, but I really did appreciate his love for art, especially since he wasn't being pretentious about it. Too many times you will see a character like Will being pretentious about art, but he's not, and I love him even more for it. In terms of Will and Irene's sibling relationship, I love it, and it's so realistic and relatable. You can tell that Grace D. Lee definitely has siblings because she captured a relatable and realistic sibling dynamic. Irene measuring herself against Will, who was the older brother, and Will seeing himself as a failure compared to her because he's more artsy, whereas Irene is more into public policy and politics. They argue and neither are perfect, but it's clear they love each other. I absolutely loved the tropey romantic relationships that the characters had. So the best friends brother trope between Will and Lily, and the enemies to lovers with Alex and Irene. That last one had me shook because I thought Irene was just being mean for no reason, but hey, it must have been the gay panic she was feeling for Alex. And I love the progression of their relationship, like they were slow burn as heck. Now I'll discuss the heists because the heists themselves were incredibly interesting. So there is always a piece of information that they would withhold from the reader so that when the reveal comes, it's shocking. Two examples of this was when Will was creating forgeries of the Zodiac heads in order to fool customs in Stockholm after their first heist. The second example was when they purposefully got caught by Daniel's dad as a diversion for them stealing information about the Met and how it knowingly displayed trafficked and looted art along with other museums in the world. So I swear when those reveals happened, I had to take a minute to appreciate the sheer brilliance of how the story did the reveals. Also, I mentioned this in the previous part, but these characters aren't professionals. So it's realistic that they're gonna get caught eventually. I just didn't expect it to be by Daniel's dad. That shows how efficient he is at his job and not rendering him useless because again, they're not criminal masterminds, they're college students. I was rooting for them to have stolen the 5 Zodiac heads back, but the ending still made sense, exposing these museums to the world and basically forcing the museums to return the Zodiac heads in order to save face. So now on to my final point, the found family trope. Will, Alex, Lily, Daniel, and Irene don't just go their separate ways after the heist. They still hang out all together by the end. They're not heisting anymore, but they're still close to each other, which owns me. I hate it when people separate after a heist. Like, after all that, you'd want to ditch your newfound family. So like, that's another reason why I love the novel. Now, before I conclude this video, here are some of my favorite quotes from the novel. Art was many things, but in the end, it was a question asked. What do you want to be remembered for? And once, Will had thought diaspora was loss, longing, all the empty spaces in him filled with want. But diaspora was this too, two cultures that could both be his, history that was waiting to be made. So overall, Portrait of a Thief is a great novel to read for fun and if you enjoy heist stories, but also if you really want to study how a heist is structured and executed. I cannot state enough how you need to read this book and how it should definitely be taught in college or university classes. It's also like a very contemporary novel that deals with post-colonialism as one of its major themes, but it could also teach like creative writing students or aspiring writers how to structure a plot really well. Also, I found out by reading the inside of the book jacket that there is a TV show based on this book that is in the works at Netflix, with Grace D. Lee serving as an executive producer for the series. So expect me to eagerly await the show, and you should definitely read the book before the show drops on Netflix. And that's a wrap on Portrait of a Thief. My next video is going to be up by early to mid-August, and it will be on Avalon High. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe.